And of course, last week you saw how that there was a letter that was written by the lawyers for the state demanding that they authenticate as well as identify the body. That was pretty much preposterous, to say the least, because we have had this going on. Tomorrow will be exactly 2 months. You may have noted that on the 5th of June, upon the death of the former President Edgar Chagwa Lungu, he died in the morning, then in the afternoons, Honorable Tasila Lungu did announce the passing on of the former president. And at some point you heard President Hakainde Hichilema telling the nation that he was aware in the morning that President Edgar Chagwa Lungu had died. We know this matter before court is brought at his instant. So who wanted to authenticate and verify the body when he was well aware, or at least he claims to have been well aware? He declared a day of national mourning, and we believe that for him to declare a day of national mourning, it was declared over an ascertained person. But you'll have noticed that there has been a lot of propaganda that has been ongoing, mostly orchestrated by the applicant, or at least their surrogates, vilifying the family and saying all sorts of things against the family. Then that letter simply put a mark to say that the source of all that propaganda that was relating to the identity, or indeed whether or not President Edgar Chagwa Lungu has died, could only have come from the state. And that letter was just authenticating that particular point. And of course, upon receipt of that letter, our lawyers did write to them to say they were seeking instructions. And of course, we did state that that was not going to happen, because it was more like a mockery to the family, and we wouldn't want to play along, or the family is disinclined to play along with the games that have been played by the state on social media and everywhere else. This is a solemn moment for the family, a solemn moment for everyone in Zambia, and it being a solemn moment, we need to take it with the seriousness that it deserves. And as such, as a family, they concentrated on the case, so concentrated on what was at the core of the case. And you may have noted the state filed in an application, and their cause of action is that the state is entitled to repatriate.
Council, that letter,
and that they are entitled.
Yeah, Council,
yes.
That letter shocked all of us because it impugned that the late president could be alive. It impugned that maybe there was no truth in his demise. How did you receive that shocking, especially the words in that letter that they wanted to inspect?
As a matter of fact, it impugned the fact that there was a matter in court. Like they were not thinking when they were took the matter to court. I'm sorry to say this, but if you're going to go to court and say you want to repatriate the remains of the former president, it means at that particular point, you've ascertained that it's the remains of the former president that you are repatriating. As a matter of fact, if indeed that was important, you don't do it at the end of the case. You do it before the case. Then if you do it before the case, you know that the person whose remains we are claiming is indeed dead, and therefore we are going to court for repatriation. Otherwise it defeats the purpose of having gone to court. It's like climbing a tree from the top. You don't do that. You don't do that. And in this particular case, that's why we're saying it appeared like a mockery to the family, and the family has been subjected to a lot of things that have been unnecessary, including this legal process. It was absolutely unnecessary for reasons that I will be able to explain as we go on. Yeah.
Before we delve into the details, there was a lot of confusion today, including, international organizations like SABC. They thought the matter was being determined today. Just give us a brief calendar. Of course, we saw at the end of the trial or the actual forum, the special forum you held today, that judgment or ruling could come any time before Friday. But just quickly speak to the calendar. What has been happening? What has been done by you? What has been done by the state? And today's hearing, then we delve into that particular matter.
You will note that this matter commenced on or about the 24th, 25th of June, when the state sought to get what they call an interdict, an equivalent of an injunction in Zambia, to stop the burial of President Edgar Chagwa Lungu here in South Africa. When we went to court, the court did not give the state an injunction to bury. We made an undertaking. It was an agreed position to say we are not going to bury until this matter is determined. It was an undertaking on both parties. So let's say the undertaking on our part was in good faith. In good faith because we saw that the state intended to just possibly disturb the process. And in trying to disturb the process, they brought a matter which is yet to be determined by the court. And the court gave them a period, or the court, through those particular orders, said they were to file the originating process by the 4th of July. We were to respond by the 11th of July, and they were to reply by the 18th of July. Then thereafter, they would file their arguments. They should have filed the arguments on the 18th, but they filed the arguments on the 22nd, and we were to reply on the 24th. That was the sequence of events. And after the 24th, the hearing was to be today, and the hearing indeed was today. And today, obviously, you may have followed the proceedings. When a matter of this sort comes up, like I did explain that they filed their arguments on the 22nd, we filed ours thereafter, meaning that the court already had the arguments that the parties were going to present before the court, and the parties were only to present that which they feel they needed to supplement on, or indeed that which may have a reason but is connected to the matter that needs to be emphasized in the matter. So we had that sort of engagement today, and you notice that the state was arguing the issue of an agreement. But if you look at the documents that they filed in court, it had nothing to do with an agreement. The reliefs that they were seeking had nothing to do with an agreement. Now, there is some interesting part in law where if you are weak on the law, you hammer the facts. Or if you are weak on the facts, you try and concentrate on the law. The state today, in my view, was playing rugby in a game of football. What do I mean by this? If you look at the reliefs that are on K4, on page K4, if I believe you should be able to have that document. So if you look at that document, those are the reliefs that the state was seeking in this particular case. Now, any person who followed the arguments that were in court today and what the prayer for the state was. Now, the court cannot get out of the boundary that the state has set for itself. And the boundary that the state has set for itself are these 3 or 4 points. Let me say 3 points because the fourth one just relates to costs. The first relief that the state is asking for in this matter is that they want the court to declare that the applicant, who is the government in this case, is entitled to repatriate the body of the late President Edgar Lungu.
Yes.
I want you to understand it for what it is.
Okay, good.
So
Please
the
help
first
us.
paragraph says, it is declared, they want a declaration that the applicant, meaning the government, is entitled the late President Edgar Chagwa Lungu. So now the state is claiming an entitlement to repatriate the body of President Edgar Chagwa Lungu. Now, the arguments that were in court, I'm trying to explain why I'm saying they were playing a game of rugby in football. They are pushing the point that they must be the ones to repatriate the body. If you look at the agreement that they were referring to, or what they say agreement that was breached, in what was our understanding the time we sat with the state, is that the family was going to repatriate the body to Zambia. You saw how that there was a private jet at the airport. You saw how that the family was ready to move into Zambia. You saw that. Now, they have come to court and they are saying they are entitled to repatriate the body. Assuming that that agreement was still valid, which we argued is not, then the state is trying to get the court to alter what was agreed by the parties. The court was not addressed on this particular point in the oral arguments. And the oral arguments tended to deal with a purported agreement. Now, you may have heard the argument on the part of our lawyer, who was saying that they have come to you. This matter has come before court. They are not asking for specific performance. Now, specific performance means that if there is an agreement between the parties and you allege that this party or party A has not followed the conditions of the agreement, you can ask the court to compel the party that is in default to follow the agreement as is laid down. Now, does this prayer mean that the court should compel the family to do what is in the agreement? No. It is introducing a new element. It is introducing a new thing that is not even part of agreement, assuming that there was an agreement that was to be followed. There was a back and forth in court that you may have noticed. And the most important part in the state arguing their case, though admitting that the requirement of the family is that President Hakainde Hichilema should be nowhere near the body, they wanted to concentrate on the aspect of repatriation. Now, we're expecting a judgment in the next few days, and that judgment of the court will be dealing with relief number one. This relief number one, should the government repatriate the body of the late President Edgar Chagwa Lungu? If they are going to say yes, they need to give reasons. And the reasons would, assuming there is an agreement, would be to go to the agreement and say, does this supposed agreement, which both parties are saying was breached, say that it is the duty of the government to repatriate the body? Your guess is as good as mine as to what the answer is going to be on this part. The second relief that the state is asking for is that the eighth respondent, this is a funeral home, be ordered that when the sheriff demands they hand over the body to the embassy of Zambia or a representative of the government of Zambia. Now, these two, if you will notice, are seeking to exclude the participation of the family in this process. Now, if the court is going to look at this and say, is it reasonable that this matter, or indeed the government or the court should order that the body, the funeral home hands it over directly to the government? These are matters that the state brought in, and our arguments in our documents, which needed not be repeated in court because they're already in the document. You heard at the beginning, the court was saying, we have read what is in the submissions. We know what you have in the submissions. What you have to do is tell us something more. This is not our case. It is a case for the state. So if the state raises an argument, ours is only to respond to matters that they have raised. Matters that have been settled in the documents are settled in the documents, and the court has already read. Now, for those that are curious and only saw what was happening, are only thinking, is that everything? No, that is not everything. The matters that are in the documents are, number one, government wants to exclusively repatriate the body to Zambia. Number two, government wants the body to be surrendered to the government of the Republic of Zambia by the funeral home, to the exclusion of the family. Number three, they are saying that the first to the seventh respondents are authorized to be present when the funeral home is handing over to the High Commission. Now, should it be the state to give permission to the family to be present when the funeral home is handing over the body? These are matters that we have argued extensively in the document. Now, they're not only saying that the family should be present when the funeral home is handing over to the government, they go further and say this should be subject to such restrictions that the government of the Republic of Zambia may reasonably impose. Meaning that government of the Republic of Zambia wants to take full control of the body, suggesting that the body belongs to the government. And the matters that they were raising in court, there is no relief that they've asked for in this particular case. It's for that reason that we keep saying they were playing rugby in a game of football. So if your opponent is playing rugby, you know that the moment you touch the ball and start running with it, that's a handball. You have a free kick. And obviously, you need not caution or warn the other party. You just concentrate on what they are raising. So that is where we are right now, and we are awaiting the judgment of the court, answering these specific questions, and not going anywhere else.
Yes, we're privileged that that you are a lawyer. You'll understand this. But for us, first of all, we watched. What we watched, what was that? Is that the entire case? You are saying there are submissions that the court has already. So I think that is important to explain what was happening today. Maybe muli science exam, mwalemba theory, mwachana practice. What was this forum today, and what have you submitted to court before? Number two, there was an issue of the Attorney General's case there through their lawyers. It seems that their demand seems to have shifted to your agreement, yet they are relying on the agreement. They are saying you've broken the agreement. They are saying that by agreeing to repatriate the body to Zambia, it meant that either both the late president and the family had agreed that the body be buried in Zambia. So why are we burying in South Africa? So just explain that before I come to the parties and show the pictures, because people don't know who is the lawyer for the family, who is the gentleman who wanted to be just included in the court case, who many people are calling a family lawyer, and who's the actual family lawyer. But maybe just go back to what was happening today. Is that your entire case we saw? And The Attorney General says you've broken the agreement. You're also telling them they've broken the agreement. Just enlighten us on all those two issues.
All right. So what you saw happening in court firstly was the application by an intervenor by the name of Vincent, who was resident in Cape Town, who wanted to join this matter. He does not represent the family, and in his application, he applied to say, in one breath, he was saying, well, whereas the family is entitled to the body belongs to the family, President Hakainde Hichilema should be allowed to attend the burial anywhere where it was going to be. What he sought to argue before court is that in the event that the court says the family is free to bury, even if it means burying in South Africa, he wanted the court to make an order that President Hakainde Hichilema can come to represent the people of Zambia and be present at the burial. That is what was before court. But the court asked, what is your interest in this particular matter? He said he would be affected in the event that if the president was his arguments were pretty much everywhere. You may have noticed that his arguments were pretty much everywhere. And obviously, at the end of it all, he was not joined to the case. The court decided you do not have sufficient interest. There is no right that you have ascertained, your right, that will be affected in the event that the court made a judgment whether to bury in South Africa or in Zambia. And so he was excluded from the matter. So the next person that you heard was the old man who was representing the state. And in his arguments, like you rightly put it, he was arguing the case on behalf of the state, hanging on to the agreement and saying the family is the one that breached the agreement. But he was candid enough to admit that there was an inclusion in the program, and that inclusion was not agreed to by the family. That inclusion was the fact that President Hakainde Hichilema would be at the airport to receive the body, and the body will be taken to a designated place for a church service, and for what was termed a church service, something that was not agreed upon prior to the departure or the family wanting to depart. Over and above that, whereas the family had said the body would be received by the state, by the family in Zambia, what happened was the day before we could even depart, government announced that only people who are going to attend by invitation were going to be there, without giving an opportunity to discuss this matter with the family, because we agreed that at every step of the way we're going to agree, meaning that the family was not able to invite the family members who are going to receive the body. And over and above that, those that what was put in the program was going to mean that the family was going to land in Zambia, and the only person to receive the body there was going to be the army and President Hakainde Hichilema. Something that was not agreed on, something that should have been agreed on. And that showed that the state could not be trusted, because at any juncture there was a change. Every time there was an agreement, there was a change. Now, there have been attempts to try and politicize this matter. But the reason the family in most cases has kept quiet and only stuck to the real issues that were being dealt with. In the middle of that, the state was bringing different stories. You would see the propaganda online, bashing the family, saying the family had bought 150 cars, the family was living luxuriously, the family are running away from the cases in Zambia. That was never the case. They even went to an extent of saying the family once their cases dropped before they can bring the body. That was never the case. You saw Mr. Patrick Chagwa confirm that that was never an issue that was discussed in the meetings that we had. And today, the government conveniently chose to argue the question of the agreement having been breached without necessarily looking at the prayers that they have in their document, which defines the four corners of their case. Even assuming that the agreement was valid, as it were, there is nothing in this document when it comes to the reliefs that the government is seeking that empowers the court to say, yes, do this, yes, or no, don't do that. Because all they are saying in this document is that they want to exclusively repatriate the body to Zambia. They want the body to be handed over from the funeral home to the government. The family cannot only be present, and they'll be present on conditions or restrictions that the government may impose. And they even go to the extent of 2 or 3 people may accompany the body. So the family in this case wonders, what is our role in all this? Who is entitled to all this? That's why in our arguments, in the several authorities, some authorities were cited in court, including by the lawyers for the state, where they are recognizing the rights of the widow, the rights of a deceased person. And our argument was that, listen, there's this right to dignity. It extends to the person who has died, but it's part of the family. And the questions that the government will be should have been answering in this case is whether or not the issue of the burial of President Chagwa Lungu would be dignified to the satisfaction of the family. Because the desire of the family in all this is one: how do we give President Edgar Chagwa Lungu a dignified send-off?
Their main thrust is that they are alleging that there is no will that was left by President Edgar Lungu where he would like to be buried. Another thrust, they are stating that his former president, therefore, if we bury in South Africa, we are denying an opportunity to President Hakainde Hichilema and the people of Zambia from mourning him with dignity, decency. These are their main arguments. So let me address the aspect what is your answer to that?
So when there is alleged that there was no will, our argument then is fortified to say where there is no will, where the late person who died has not stated how they should be buried, then what happens is that the decision of the family, particularly the next of kin or the spouse, is the one that will stick. That is the law. Now there was an argument to say this is not an ordinary person. This is a former president. And you heard when the court said in jest to say, well, the state has said that those benefits come back. And the court went further and said, well, that's a concession on the part of the state. Now, what's the extent of this concession? They are conceding that this office, now the court will have to determine whether the position of a former president as an office and a person that held the position of former president. If you look at the letter that was filed in court, the letter that related to whether or not the president was entitled to those benefits, if you read it and read it carefully, you will not.
Are you talking about the letter dated? Are you talking about the letter dated? I think 29th October 2023, written by Dr. Oliver Kalabo as Deputy Secretary to Cabinet, in which he stripped off the benefits for the late president because the late president had joined partisan politics. Is that the letter you are referring to?
That's the letter I'm referring to, but particularly the last paragraph of that letter will tell you that they said the office of the sixth Republican president is closed with immediate effect and the members of staff redeployed. Now, the office of the sixth Republican president is the one that is entitled to all those benefits by the person that is in that office. So, in name, President Edgar Chagwa Lungu was a former president. The office of the sixth Republican president, which entitled him to those benefits, had been closed. The benefits had been stripped away. And the argument before court by the government is that upon his demise, then those benefits come back. That is what the state argued. And the court was gracious enough to say, well, that is a concession on the part of the state.
What did the court mean when they said that? They'll buy a house,
they'll buy a car. Yes. You heard how that the lawyer for the government was saying, yeah, they'll buy her a car, they'll build her a house. That is what they said. But that only goes to confirm that indeed this is the person that you stopped from traveling for medicals. This is the person who, when he traveled for medicals, traveled in their private capacity and was here in South Africa in their private capacity. You have come in now because he is dead. The court will have to determine that. But the determination of that, does it go to fulfill any of these reliefs? If the conclusion is that this person who has died was a former president that is entitled to those benefits, and the benefits that are in that particular document are funeral expenses in relation to death. Those are the only benefits that are there. But of course, there is a circular that talks of burial, funerals and all. It is not law. The government did not state before court any law that says the president must be, or a former president, or indeed the president buried in this manner. The argument before court was that there are protocols and procedures that have been developed over time. You, Ambassador, will agree with me that the first death that we have of a former president was in 2008, or indeed of a president was in 2008. And so far, we have had 4 presidents that have died, and President Edgar Chagwa Lungu is the 5th one. And these have died. And according to the state, this has condensed into a tradition, a custom, and a culture. And we are saying, no, 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 no. It can't develop into a tradition, a custom, and a culture merely because the others have been buried there. The alternative argument was that, well, there's the Kaweche Kaunda case, and we have argued that this is different, and the court did say that, well, listen, for Kenneth Kaunda, he died in Zambia. President Edgar Chagwa Lungu has died in South Africa. That's a distinction. But our lawyer went further to say, listen, the case of Kaweche is different because President Kenneth Kaunda even had benefits of a former president, as well as that judgment which was given by the court was not a judgment on a substantive matter where parties were allowed to be heard or parties were heard. It was a matter for judicial review which failed, and those were stated by the way by the judge because the parties were not heard. So it's not a matter that has really been tested in the Zambian courts. That is what we had prevailing in court today, and we look forward to the court answering these 3 prayers that the state prayed. And these 3 prayers do not say anything about the supposed agreement. And with these 3 prayers, the court can't even come to an extent of saying, well, the agreement should be followed, because it doesn't deal with that. And that was the argument that our lawyer was presenting, to say there is no prayer for specific performance. There's nothing in the prayer that alleges or wants a finding.
In fact, Counsel, that's what I want you to dwell on just for a few minutes, because you stated something just now, that this is not your case. It is a case of the Attorney General. So the case of the Attorney General, the Attorney General came to argue his case. You also stated that you've made submissions already. You've already laid your rebuttal to the Attorney General's case.
Exactly. So
today,
what was being talked about in court is just a tip of an iceberg. You have the over 73 pages of arguments, 53 pages of arguments that has already been filed in court, which were not touched on whilst we're in court. The state raised an issue of the supposed agreement, looking at the progression of the matter, but then forgetting that the issues that they want the court to determine have got nothing to do with the agreement. And
because the agreement was deemed breached by both parties. And that's why we're in court.
Well, in this particular case, yes, both parties are saying you breached. On our part, we didn't breach any part of it. According to them, you breached when you decided not to repatriate. And we're saying, no. You breached when you changed the terms and conditions of the compromise that we had. Now, that is a compromise on the part of the family that was reached, which they have called an agreement. But that compromise was conditional on them abiding to all that was put in those concessions that we made. So the family made certain concessions. The state was to abide by all those concessions that the family made. They chose not to. So with that conditionality having been breached, we couldn't move. That is for possibly another case. This particular case, the government is saying we are entitled to repatriate. The family must be excluded from this process, save to be present and on conditions that may be imposed by the government. Now, how cruel can you be? So those are the things that will have to be determined.
Thank you, Counsel. Let me bring the visuals because there's been confusion. I saw a lot of confusion on social media. Who is a family spokesperson? I mean, who's a family lawyer? Who's a lawyer for the Attorney General? And who is this young man, Vincent, from Cape Town? Many people thought that Vincent was actually the family lawyer. Let me just bring those visuals for a minute. And thank you to the dear viewers, the thousands that have joined this podcast. We are grateful. There will be an opportunity for you to call and air your views. Let me just begin with the visuals so that we see what was happening at court.
Reporting live from the other team has been defeated.
Lebe mchimba bantu beshu but we stand with
we are standing with you.
This your family. Wawa mama ukwati batashani hapo.
So in that visual, you see that the visuals there is that the protesters hired for government abandoned their protest and left the posters there. This is a lawyer for government.
Lady will bear in mind that there was the agreement reached that when the funeral takes place, that the current president will be permitted to be there when foreign dignitaries to receive them, and also when the state funeral takes place. Now, I emphasize this because this is one of the grounds on which the respondents, when they made the remarkable about turn on the 18th.
So you watch that. That is the main lawyer for the Attorney General who was presenting his case. We have the lawyer for the family. This is the lawyer for the family.
The affidavit must contain the facts and the pleading. Therefore, we had to file the conditional counter application to align our pleadings with the facts. Something the applicant chose not to do any further with regards to what type of relief they sought. They sought a declarative. They didn't seek specific performance in prayer one day. So we needed to align everything to make sure that everything's before court, everything's properly ventilated. The facts that we rely on, which the applicant says is non-existent in that affidavit, is existent. We rely on all the facts already stated, the representation, the impossibility that they have met to say if there's a breach, it's not material, and in any event, it's impossible to agree to such a term because the President will be there. And then obviously the undue hardship has already been dealt with. It will be undignified to force the respondents to have the current President preside over the funeral of the late President.
Sorry, are you saying we must read those factors in?
Those factors are dealt with because we incorporate the factors of the answering affidavit in the counter application. We start off by saying everything that's said in the answering affidavit is applicable. The reason why the conditional counter application...
Then there was a case of a third party who had applied as an intervenor. You know, as counsel would explain, an intervenor is a third party who joins an existing lawsuit or processes, and they were not originally part of it. They are third parties, but they are saying they want to assert interest. Some people are saying this is the lawyer for the family, but this is Vincent, a businessman who lives in Cape Town. In fact, if you see his initial filing in court, he was demanding that the body be taken to Zambia for President Hakainde Hichilema to host the funeral. I think Honorable Makebi Zulu can speak to that. He also stated that in the event at the funeral, the court were to rule that the funeral would be held in Zambia, he should be allowed, President Lungu should be allowed to attend. That's Vincent. He's not a lawyer.
We have the church leaders, church leaders, and NGOs, people who are not worshiping government. If you bring people worship government, can't that be? Because
so Vincent Kafula is a Zambian national based in Cape Town. He came to court. I think I'll publicize his earlier filing in court when he wanted to be joined to the case as an intervener. He said President Hakainde Hichilema was entitled to the body because he's president of the Republic of Zambia. He's entitled to, to sit and preside over this funeral. That was his main application. He mumbo-jumbled in, but he has written submissions in his application that you can be aware of. Then the Attorney General made some interesting views after the case. He admitted that the South African law, this is the Attorney General, Mulilo Kavesha, admitted that the South African law only allows the next of kin to decide the fate of the deceased person. Listen to him.
And the late indicated. But what even the court was asking, that did the deceased president make his wish that he wanted to be buried in Zambia? And the answer was yes. So who is saying he shouldn't be buried in Zambia? The first respondent is the one who has made a decision. But again, of course, she could have made that decision because the law here in South Africa says the next of kin. Yeah, so it's looking at what the law says here.
So the Attorney General admitted, counsel, the Attorney General admitted that in South Africa, and the South African law, the next of kin determined the fate of the deceased. But earlier he had asked, he's alleging that there is no will by the late president to be buried elsewhere other than Zambia. And then he's asking that question, who is then making that decision? Then he ends up by saying that he recognizes that the law in South Africa allows for states that the next of kin determines it. Of course, later he began to argue the issue of public interest. Just speak to this particular matter.
Well, indeed, the law in South Africa is that in the absence of a will, an expression by the person that obviously the decision of the next of kin, who may be the widow, if in the absence of the widow, the next of kin, yet another person in line would make the determination. And it's for that reason that we're saying, listen, what was heard in court was only a part. You didn't see the video of President Edgar Chagwa being played in court, but it is submitted and the judges are considering those videos. You didn't see other audio and video evidence that we have presented before the court as to what has been going on in, relating to this matter. You've not seen all those, because if we had to go through everything, it would have taken a month or two to indeed go through everything, dissect every conversation, dissect every video. Then it would have taken forever. And the court said, listen, we have already looked at what is contained in this. There are videos and audios presented by the states. There are videos and audios presented by us, the respondents in this matter. I say us because I'm cited as the seventh respondent in the matter. And then argue on other things that you emphasize or that are a core part of your matter. And this is the state's case. So the state argued what they thought was important to them, which unfortunately, we have looked at this, does not fall within the three prayers that they are speaking to. And we were able to respond relating to that matter. And in this particular case, it is fortunate that we are where we are.
Counsel, let me just interrupt, unfortunately. Are you saying that the state introduced an argument that is not in their submissions? Did the state introduce new facts? And what are the ramifications?
The state veered off from what is in their prayers, because whatever you're going to plead should be going to substantiate why you think the court must give you a particular order. Now, when the state came up with their case, they came up with their case with a sense of entitlement, that is our entitlement to repatriate the body by ourselves. The family can only accompany. This is a very sad matter, I must say. And it borders on failure of leadership. I wouldn't want to really get down to, I'm trying to avoid being perceived to be politicizing this issue because of the role that I'm playing in this matter. And we should look at this matter devoid of politics. And in looking at it devoid of politics, we're saying perhaps the leadership right from the start did not handle this matter very well. The family, being in a very vulnerable position, should not be taken for granted. To suggest that they have no say of a person who is not only a father, but is also a husband, an uncle, a grandfather. He's many things to many people. It is important that the question that must be determined is a decent burial. Like I said, in court, we have submitted videos. It has been said that there is no will, but you can decipher, even from the way he was speaking, what he would have wanted. Not only that, he also communicated his wishes to those he loved. Even assuming that he didn't, the family has a right to decide what will amount to a dignified send-off. The culmination of all the things that have happened in between and put together seems to suggest that it will be impossible for President Hakainde Hichilema's government to give President Edgar Chagwa Lungu a dignified send-off. It will appear as though these are spoils of war we have conquered and therefore we are burying. That is what it may appear to be. And the family is trying to avoid such kind of a display, and they're saying we need to bury him in a respectful manner, in a manner that is deemed dignified on the part of the family. We know he was a president for all Zambians. We know that Zambians gave him this particular opportunity. But the manner in which the ones that want to superintend over this event does not connote or denote that this person will be given a dignified send-off. That is what it is. If I were President Hakainde Hichilema, and it is communicated to me that President Edgar Chagwa Lungu has died, the first thing I'll probably do is call the widow and say, listen, I may not have had a good relationship with your husband because we were playing politics. He has died now, and I know you may have preferences as a family. I want to assure you that I will be there for you to help in any way if there's anything that I can do. We have a protocol, or we've developed this system over time where we bury our president at Embassy Park. If you are willing or you'd like to, it would be good. As a matter of fact, I would like to come through and convey my condolences. But if you can't allow me, perhaps I'll send my wife. Something like that could have shown some humane aspect from the government. Something like that could have shown that indeed they are interested in resolving these issues. If for some reason President Hakainde Hichilema thought that his relationship with President Edgar Chagwa Lungu was indeed that toxic, and or if the family says, no, we do not want to see you, he could simply request, may I send my wife to you? If I were him, I would say, perhaps I can send my wife to you to come and just convey my condolences. If you can't have my wife, perhaps the vice president or any minister to come through to you. It just doesn't have to be him. If the family says, it is you we don't want, why are you insisting? If the family feels a dignified send-off for President Edgar Chagwa Lungu would require that you're absent, give it to them. You will not die if you did that. Nothing wrong will happen to you if you did that. Just yield to the desires of the family. That gives them the sense that President Edgar Chagwa Lungu has been a dignified send-off, even if it means them burying away from home. If it gives them the sense that this is a dignified send-off, leadership requires that you do just that. If you're going to negotiate, you don't negotiate using persons that have spoken ill of the deceased. You don't decide who should be on the other side whom you want to talk to. You don't decide who you are going to play football with from the other team. You can't say substitute the goalkeeper and put this goalkeeper. You don't do that. But in this whole thing, it may be more than we are seeing. And I would request that perhaps as a country, we pray for our nation. We pray for continued cohesion as a nation. But above all this, we need to pray for the Lungu family. We pray for God's comfort. We pray that if at all it is beyond what we see, if this matter could be spiritual, we pray that this matter be dealt with. We pray for God's intervention. It will be very important that we do that. In the meantime, the Lungu family wishes the Zambians well, and they thank you for the well wishes that you've expressed, the messages of condolences that keep pouring in, And they want you to know that they have not neglected you in any way. They just want President Edgar Chagwa Lungu to be given what would be a dignified send-off, and not his body to be treated as bounty or booty or indeed spoils of war. That is all they're asking for. I think it's not too much to ask. Thank you for having me, and we pray that you continue praying for us here in South Africa, continue praying for the family, for God to give them strength. Tomorrow will be exactly 2 months with President Edgar Lungu in the morgue. May peace indeed. And we look forward to that particular day where we indeed say his soul is resting in peace.
Council, before I let you go, I don't know, are you able to take about 5 calls, then you leave? And number 2, speak to forgiveness, because the government and the chiefs have lined up, some so-called members of the church that they've lined up are saying we are not using this funeral to unite the country. It has in fact caused more division. Is there something the family could have done? I know from the family side probably they expected the president to apologize, the president to reach the family home. He has not reached the family home. He has not even, or for example, the first lady has not reached to see the former first lady. The funeral that was held at Belvedere was like a fanfare for the UPND, while the PF and others held at the secretariat. President Hakainde Hichilema has not been to the funeral home, either in Chifwema or to South Africa. But is there something you could have done? Because I saw the propaganda pushed on ZNBC, where the button is being pushed to the family, that the family is not being forgiving, the family is not using this funeral to unite. What are your perspectives on that?
You see, there's so much pressure being brought to bear on the family to say the family should be forgiving. Who has asked for that forgiveness? See, there are certain things that we have to be very sensitive when we're dealing with people that are bereaved. This matter in court has exposed a lot. Like we said, the story will be told, and it is being told. You heard how that the state in their documents are agreeing to say, yes, we stopped him for going for his medicals in 2023. We stopped him because he didn't present the particulars as to why he wanted to go. But in later, they did not give a reason as to why they stopped him. But in the same breath, they said, he had been ill since 2015, a condition that led him to go to South Africa on the 19th of January. Now, how evil can you be where you're saying we were aware all this time? We stopped him because he didn't tell us. But why should you tell you of something you are aware of if indeed that's... In your letter, you didn't say, why didn't you ask for particulars or the reasons? You simply said, it's denied. And at the time you were denying him, he still enjoyed what were the benefits of a former president. And you gave no reason. You go ahead and attempt and say that we stopped him from flying to Korea because the event that he was going for, which was a peace summit, by the way, an event that happens annually, there are no politics there. It's an annual summit. You said he was going there for political purposes. That's why we stopped. He went to Ndola. You said he was going there for political purposes. That's why you stopped him. When the invitation was by a pastor's fellowship and was to speak at the pastor's fellowship, you agree to all these things, and then you bring pressure to bear on the family that the family should forgive. It is not whether or not the family is forgiving or not. That is not the issue here. We can't reduce it to be an issue of forgiveness. It is an issue of what would amount to a dignified send-off for President Edgar Chagwa, Lungu. Indeed, everyone is forgiven. All are forgiven. Does forgiving someone mean that you acquiesce to a bad and dignified? We think not. A dignified burial is independent of issues of bitterness, is independent of issues of forgiveness. It is just that. What will give this burial an aura of respectability that it deserves? Those are matters that ought to be considered. Those are matters that should be dealt with by those in government in looking at this thing, and not looking at this as a political exhibition intended to stop what is perceived as regional embarrassment or national embarrassment. It's beyond that. What amounts to a dignified send-off? If we are able to answer that question in Zambian, every person worth being called a leader would consider those as being very important. That's what I would say as regards this matter.